Good afternoon, everyone. We'll be starting in a couple of minutes. Thank you.
Great. Is this okay volume for you? Or am I speaking too loud? It's okay? Okay, great. Thanks. Okay, so welcome you all to this event. And quite crazy times are happening right now at COP. We don't know how the text it's going to look. We don't know what's going to happen with the negotiations. But we do know that we have a specific deadline for NDCs. It's super soon, just 3 months. The new round of NDCs should be presented in February 2025. And this event is focused on the food systems aspect of this. And a just launched report of FAO highlighted that more than 90% of NDCs highlight the food systems as a priority for both mitigation and adaptation, versus still space to boost this ambition. And there is also a need for countries to get more closer to the tools, to the good practices and everything that's available around. So for that aim, we have a great panel here with me. It's key to know what are the different works that the different organizations that are doing, and also the voices of the countries. So I would like to start with some keynotes. And I would like to invite Martina Fleckstein. I'm going to first apologize for my pronunciation of all these last names of these experts. So I would like to please introduce you, and then when you're here taking the floor, you might better pronounce your names. So first of all, we will hear two keynote presentations from Martina Fleckstein. She's the Global Policy Director on Food from WWF International. Please take one chair. And also, after Martina, we're going to hear from Moritz Fegert, Project Officer from Foundation BioVision. And then we will have a very interesting panel. But first of all, we're going to hear to these keynote presenters. And Martina, maybe we would like to start with you. And take us through the biodiversity and freshwater NDC toolkit.
Thank you, and thanks a lot. And I have to admit, I see some faces from the morning session. So you will see now the same or more or less the same presentation. I hope it's okay. Good. So I would like to. I would like to talk about the national determined contribution, and one of the major targets of our organization of WWF is the integration of food and agriculture in global policy agendas and also at the end in the national agendas. And in this context, for climate, it's the nationally determined contribution which plays a crucial role, and for biodiversity, it's the national biodiversity strategy and action plans. In both the NBSUPs and the NDCs, they both have to be updated. We're just coming from Cali, where member states had been asked to update their NBSUPs, and a few have done this. And for the NDCs, there is an official or an unofficial deadline end of March next year, at least until COP30 in Belém. All member states should review, update their NDC 3.0, and especially to have more ambitious NDCs. And in this context, we have started this journey on really advocating for agriculture and food system in NDCs in 2022, where we have assessed the NDCs, and at that time we realized that there are huge gaps and that food and agriculture is not really prominent. And then we talked to member states and NDC focal points, NDC facilitator, and we realized, there is a knowledge gap, and to fill this knowledge gap, we have developed an NDC guidance, which you see here, which is a web-based guidance, and which gives information about policy options and measures on food and agriculture. The guidance is, we have to make it very simple, easy to handle, and it only takes you 3 clicks to get on the content. The first, what you see, is the landing page. The landing page gives you information about what are NDCs, so there is some general information. The tool is at the moment available beside English, in French and Spanish, and we will upload in the next days also a Portuguese version. And what's also important, it's not a WWF standalone work. It was developed with a huge group of people, several times peer-reviewed. So we have done this together with UN Environmental Program. We have done this with FAO, with BioVision, with FAIR. Also CGIAR, which is not, I think, yes, they are mentioned or not, but they gave a lot of support, and with the NDC partnership. So it's really something which has been developed in a joint approach. So if you go from this first page to the next one, what you see here at the right-hand side from me, you see the intervention areas, and we have clustered it in 5 intervention areas: food environment, food governance, food production, supply chain, and diets. And then you could go from each of these intervention areas you could go then to the policy options. And the policy options give you information about implementation measures. So there is a long set which will be relevant in particular once based on the NDCs, the action plans, the regional one, have to be developed. It's about the co-benefits, linkage to SDGs, co-benefits for adaptation, for mitigation. We also have considered the trade-offs. If possible, you find information about costs, monitoring tools and case studies, and also some small videos to explain what's already happening on the ground. So that's one thing, and this tool we are currently presenting or working with a selection of about 20 member states where we have in-person dialogues. For example, in Vietnam we had one, and I see the colleague from Vietnam here. We will have one in Madagascar, and there's also a colleague from Madagascar here. So we really are about to work with the governments in a whole of government, whole of society approach, and to discuss with the member states about the relevant intervention for the NDCs, because it's a selection of 30 and not all are relevant for all member states. So that's happening at the moment. The second thing, just to give you a snapshot, is for the COP here, we have wanted to know what has happened in the last year on NDCs, is there any improvement, and the thing is that, the good thing is that from the updated NDCs, and this are the one between 2022 and now, not the new one. For the new one, we have only 3. At least there is a tendency that food and agriculture are better respected and considered, but still only 5 NDCs are really considering a systemic approach, which means they are looking at nature positive production, at food loss and waste, and at diets. And the huge gaps are still on the food loss and waste, and especially on diet and consumption, which is still more or less absent in the NDCs. And I'm looking at Yuping. I know that Vietnam is one of the examples who really are considering also consumption and diets in the new NDCs, which will be launched next year. And the third product which we have, which is a tool kit, which means it's a selection, it's a compilation of tools. This is a publication which we do together with FAO, and it's published at the FAO website also. We had the first version for COP28, and in COP29 for this year, we have updated, integrating the aspect of biodiversity and of freshwater. And this tool gives you information about priority areas. It has a lot of examples on NDCs and NB subs. It also shows possibilities for monitoring tools. It gives information about other existing tools. So there is a broad range of tools and availability and information. And we probably will update this again for the next COP with a stronger focus also on diets. And what's also in this tool is we have also really a selection of good examples. So because there are already good examples in member states, and you see here some of the member states we have highlighted, but there are more in the tool where we really could get inspiration of how implementation could look like at the ground. And I think that's my last slide. At the end, I think what is important, clearly, 2 things. One is we really need to integrate food and agriculture in biodiversity, in climate, and in the UNCCD, in the desertification land agenda. And the second thing is we really need a better alignment of all the 3 Rio conventions, because this is something we have to get out of the silo thinking, and this is something at a global level, but it's also something at the national level, because very often the NDCs are with the environment, and the agriculture ministry is absent or is not going to be asked. We need to have really, if we talk about NDC and NB subs, to also have ministries for health, for example, to be involved, And once again, Vietnam was a good example. When we had the workshop in Vietnam, we had really 4 ministries been involved, even Ministry for Trade, who was with us around the table to discuss about future NDCs. So thanks for that, and I give back to the moderator.
Thanks very much, Martina, for your great presentation. Very clear on what we need, accessible, useful for the countries, and many organizations working behind it. That's important that we will all work together for one specific goal. That's keep the 1.5 and keep accessible food systems. And not only is it important to work all organizations together, our knowledge and everything, but also to hear good practices. And I would like to now pass the floor to Moritz to give us some some examples on your work from the foundation, please.
Thank you so much, Daniela, and yeah, thanks also for the opportunity to be able to being here. Before I start, a quick word about BioVision Foundation. What do? We are supporting a transition to food systems that are more ecological and socially responsible, and we believe that agroecology is the approach to achieve this. We focus on Eastern Africa, and this is why I will give you some examples from the region where we work together with partners on policies that help to scale up agroecology at the national level. Yes, and we believe that the topic of today's session is innovative NDCs and how we can help countries in boosting their NDCs and achieving more ambitious NDCs. And we really believe that agroecology is the way to do so. In Eastern Africa, what we observe is that these national agroecology strategies are being developed in Tanzania, in Uganda, in Kenya, and they can really help countries in achieving more ambitious mitigation objectives, and also, and most importantly, in these countries as well, meet adaptation targets that they want to achieve. And so these policies can help to scale up these policies and strategies that are being developed. In Tanzania, it is already developed, but in Kenya and Uganda, we expect the national agroecology strategies to be adopted by the end of the year. And they can really help to scale up agroecology at the national level. What does it mean? It means that farmers are supported financially to make a transition to more ecological approaches, but also that the infrastructure around it, so that, for instance, alternatives are being developed or made available, and also that you create markets for agroecological products and incentivize or facilitate consumption of these alternatives, which are more healthy and are more sustainable as well, and in the end help countries with their mitigation and adaptation objectives. And so these strategies help countries in achieving challenges related to food security, but also climate resilience, biodiversity loss, water uses, and also achieving decent farm incomes for farmers. And so what we did with BioVision Foundation, we are in contact with ministries of agriculture, representatives from the ministries of agriculture working on these policies and strategies in the countries, but also civil society organizations which are directly involved in the development of these strategies. And we did a policy brief analyzing the developments in Eastern and Southern Africa. And this is a summary of the objectives that these strategies contain. And as you can see, there's different objectives along the food value chain, going from the management of natural capital and ensuring access and sustainable use of this natural capital, but then also the support to farmers in their transition to agroecological approaches and practices. And as I said as well, looking at the value chain, at the supply chains, and supporting enterprises who want to scale up their production when it comes to transformation, also processing and transport. And then in the end, there's also many interventions and policy proposals on creating strong markets for these agroecological products and supporting consumption of agricultural products and healthy diets. And then you have different objectives which also look at cross-cutting issues, which are targeting more, aiming to support actors along the value chain with strong policies, financial mechanisms that support these measures, but also building capacity within government and within civil society organizations to make the transition, and also supporting vulnerable communities. And maybe just one concrete example from the Kenyan strategy. It is a measure which is proposing to support the production, but also the production, the registration, and then the distribution of organic and bio inputs to really provide alternatives to farmers who are maybe heavily relying still on chemical fertilizers, to be sure that they have alternatives in place and that they have alternatives at hand that they can use instead of using chemical fertilizers. So the Kenyan strategy is recommending to invest in research on bio inputs and organic fertilizers, but also to update national standards for organic inputs, and then to simplify also the product registration processes for these organic and bio inputs. And then regarding financing of these measures, it is suggesting that existing subsidy schemes for chemical fertilizers are being opened up to these bio inputs and alternatives that exist. So this is just one example, and for each of these objectives you have many more interventions in the strategies, which you can find in the policy brief that I mentioned. We launched it earlier this year. It is still available online, and really contains key information on how these strategies were developed, but also recommendations on how you can prioritize policy actions which are contained in these strategies, and how governments can fund these strategies. And maybe just 3 key takeaway messages from my presentation. What we observe is that agroecology, and also more specifically these agroecology policy frameworks, are a way to coordinate national action when it comes to climate commitments that they have under the UNFCCC, but then also what Martina mentioned as well under the CBD when it comes to biodiversity action, and then also potentially under the UNCCD when it comes to land degradation objectives. And there's really potential to also to streamline action at the country level, to also reduce the costs of these interventions, because with 1 or 2 interventions you can directly hit 2 to 3 national commitments that countries have in the different Rio conventions. And just a quick hint to a guidance tool that we also launched earlier back in October in Cali during COP16. It's a guidance tool to boost biodiversity action through agroecology with again concrete proposals, intervention areas that countries can follow in terms of agroecological interventions to boost their biodiversity action, and these can also directly be incorporated into NDCs, because biodiversity and climate action are actually closely interlinked. And so we believe that now is the time, as Martina said, countries have to update their national biodiversity strategies and action plans and their NDCs. So it's really there's great momentum and timing and opportunity to align and streamline action in the different Rio spaces. And with this, I think I'm done, and I'm happy to give the floor to you. Thanks.
Thank you very much, Moritz. And again, you both highlighted the importance of connecting the 3 Rio conventions. We're having intense end of the year with these 3 COPs, but food is across all of them. So thanks very much for showing us these tools and how we can move forward into achieving these goals, and also connecting all the Rio conventions. I don't know if anyone has maybe a question for our keynote presenters before we move to the panel. Okay, let's go.
Thanks for the information. I also engaged a little bit at the beginning together with the team in Vietnam. My name is Tuyển from Malayan Biodiversity and CGIAR, and we also recognize that a very big effort from WF and others to also go forward together with food system, etc. However, maybe please also consider upcoming years on how we match more concrete example, at also not only planning at the national level, but also planning at the subnational level and implementation, because that will be right also to put in the toolkit more examples so different countries can learn from each others and how to move forward for the convergence. Thank you. Yeah.
Yeah, thanks a lot. And I think it's a very important question, remark from you, because I think we are in this very global, national, but at the end, and it's also looking for the COP30, we have to look what's happening on the ground. Yeah, and I think the next focus should really be on the implementation. What are the lessons learned? What are the partners we need? And it's all about financing, and financing not only public but also private money. And I really would like to encourage you also to think about how we could bring this more prominent and more obvious for BELEM then, and to really put this as one of the agenda topics. It's about implementation, because the things are happening on the ground. We set the global targets, but the implementation are always happening on the ground, and without these projects on the ground, we will never solve the big problems of climate change, biodiversity loss, and food security.
Maybe quickly to complement, I think we also at the subnational level, we don't need to reinvent the wheel. If I can take a prominent example from Kenya, where we have Murang'a County, which has developed and is really implementing now its county policy on agroecology, which is inspiring many other counties in Kenya. Kenya being a federal state, you also have these subnational agricultural approaches and policies. And in Murang'a County, we really have a really progressive and success case on a agroecological approach, policy and strategy.
Thank you so much, and a big round of applause to our keynote presenters. And I would like to move to our panel discussion. I would like to welcome Dr. Santosh Nepal, researcher on water resources and climate change from the International Water Management Institute, IMI, and delegate from Nepal in this COP. And Dr. Ake, please, Senior Agriculture Specialist from the Ministry of Agriculture and Cooperatives of Thailand, and representing the Asian Climate Resilience Network, also representing his country, Thailand, in this COP. Dr. Michelle Tiglehard, sorry again, Climate Environmental Sustainability Scientist and Impact Area Lead from Worldfish, very welcome. And Jeremy Schlickenrieder, sorry. I've been living 1 year in Germany, and this is very embarrassing, but my apologies. Natural Resources Officer for Climate Change and Sustainability of the FAO Regional Office for Europe and Central Asia. Thanks for coming to this event. And I would like to start with Dr. Santosh. Nepal is preparing to update its NDC in the next 3 months. Why is it critical to include the water sector in the next updates for these NDCs and balance also this mitigation and adaptation topics that we were hearing over and over again, but why is it important? And maybe you could give us examples on what's Nepal doing in these aspects.
Thank you, Daniela. Thank you for the opportunity. So Nepal is preparing the next NDC updates for early 2025, and actually if you look at the previous NDCs, the first was submitted in 2016, and that was primarily focused on the mitigation aspects in terms of reducing the greenhouse gases. The second NDC was submitted towards the end of 2020, which was also mitigation, but at that time there was more balanced with the adaptation aspect was also included. But if you look at the figure globally, out of 172 NDCs submitted in 2020, 147 had some sort of adaptations included in the document. So with the same lines in 2022, Nepal also submitted the NDC implementation plan that established the measurable activity and policy targets for the energy, agriculture, forestry, and then the other land use sectors. So now Nepal is moving towards the next update of the NDC, early next year, and we have already initiated the discussions, particularly the Ministry of Forest and Environment, who is the focal ministry for the climate change related activities, is also coordinating the development of the next NDC 3.0, and they have already started the inter-ministerial coordination in terms of developing, bringing the different issues of the adaptation and mitigations, and have already started coordinating with the different ministries. The coordination committee has also established. International Water Management Institute, with support from the CGIAR Nexus Gains initiative, also supporting the government of Nepal in terms of how we can bring the the water sector, water inclusion in the next NDC update. So for that reason, we are also collaborating with the Ministry of Energy, Water Resources and Irrigation. So bringing the water sector is very important because while being ambitious in the next NDC target, we also need to balance the mitigation and adaptations equally. So for example, Nepal, being a mountainous country, has the huge hydropower potential, and then the NDC has already established like 15,000 megawatt of energy by 2030, which is a clean energy again, however, without managing the water resources, and particularly the variability of the water resources in terms of too much water, that we have like very much the monsoon dominated regions, so we have a very flooding situation in the 4-5 months of the year, but at the same time the rest of the 8 months we have a very little water resources, so that it's very important to manage that variability. And then very importantly, that we have already explored, and then the Ministry of Energy has already kind of compiled a first draft of the the document in terms of what are the opportunities to bring the water sector into the next NDCs, and some of the discussions include like bringing the agriculture sector and particularly the agri-food systems. What are the opportunities for Nepal? So for example, the electrification in the farm machinery is one opportunity to reduce the greenhouse gas emissions, and also promoting the improved the hydrometeorological informations and agro advisory, just to deal with the situations of the floods and droughts, and that also brings a lot of opportunities for the improving the agri-food systems. We are also discussing in terms of how we can bring the improved promoting the drought resistance varieties or the flood resistance, the varieties of the different agricultural products, and very importantly, how do we provide the timely access to this for the seeds and then the other agrological input like the seeds to the farmers. So in terms of energy efficiency, the promoting the climate smart agriculture is something that we can really bring to the Nepal sector. In irrigation sector, Nepal has already moving towards the solar powered irrigation system. So using the solar powered irrigation in the pumping of the water for irrigation systems, which is also kind of is helping that variability of the hydrological flows when it is really needed water in the plantation time, when the water is not available in the irrigation canal. That's where the solar powered irrigation systems can do the magic. In irrigation sector, also promoting the efficiency in water use irrigation systems, such as the drip and sprinkle irrigation system is another opportunities that we are trying to promote. And to deal with the variability, we are also kind of looking at opportunities for the multi-purpose the water storage, which can also support not only the irrigation sector, the other sectors. So I think there are opportunities both in terms of quantifiable targets, in terms of, for example, the solar powered irrigation system. How can we bring these solar powered irrigation system into the the sub-national government levels, particularly the municipality level? That sort of opportunities come with the quantifiable targets, but also there are like policy targets that we can work in terms of bringing the efficiency into the the agriculture practices or irrigation practices. So for that reasons, the Ministry of Energy is very much promoting the co-benefit aspects of the water in terms of both mitigation and adaptations in the other sectors, but also equally to the agri-food system. So lastly, the narrations that in the multi-stakeholder platforms that we are trying to bring is like, do not look at water as a sector, but see water as a system connector, because without water you cannot manage the agriculture systems, you cannot manage well the energy sectors or the ecosystem sector. So we really need to look at this water, energy, food ecosystem nexus perspective. That's what the my organization IMI is trying to promote in Nepal through this CGIAR Nexus Gains initiative. So I think looking at this narration of looking water as a system connector is very, very important. So so I will stop here. Maybe I'll come back again.
Thank you very much, Santosh. And very important to highlight how these systems, everything is a system. That's why we keep repeating the cooperation and how we need to work together. Because, as you mentioned, without water, nothing is going to happen. And also, I want to highlight what you were saying about the different sectors and how they need to work together for the NDCs. And we're going to also hear from the different speakers about that too. But thanks very much for telling us what Nepal is doing in that sense. And now I would like to move to Dr. Ake. I would like to hear how the Asian and the network is working to integrate nutrition security into food and agriculture efforts across the Asian region, and what key opportunities and challenges you see for aligning this more closely with climate and sustainability goals. There you go.
Thank you very much, Daniela. Again, Thirawut Chininantakun, no? And my nickname is Ek, in short. So it's okay for the other is difficult for Thai. That's, I understand it. In the term of the ASEAN CRN that you asked me about that, because we are now Thailand is the chair of ASEAN CRN or ASEAN Climate Resilient Network. In the term of the network, so we could integrate an effort on several parts. The first one is about the regional framework or policy that we will encourage on the sustainable agricultural practices with addressing on the nutrition needs. So, and this include enhancing the food production and also improve food distribution and ensuring access to the nutritious foods. The second one is about the collaboration initiative. So on this, we focus on the sharing on the best practice in nutrition, sensitive agriculture, and how to enhance the nutrition quality of food products. Next is about the capacity building, that we focus on the training program or the workshop to educate the farmer and the stakeholder about the sustainable agricultural practices, and also focus on the nutrition outcome. The last one is about the knowledge sharing. Of course, it's from the research or study that, and also the data collection that on the intersection of about the nutrition and agricultural and climate change. For the opportunity, because among the network of the ASEAN CRN, most of it is government sector. So we have the opportunity because we can manage and we collaborate with the policy on the agriculture sector in each country. So the second one that about this, we have the challenge now in the ASEAN CRN. We got the readiness GCA fund to implement the new project on the each national and regional. We can add more in the sector of the nutrition in this that we are implementing. The next is about the education and awareness. This we can input about the importance on the nutrition and sustainable practices that can drive the consumer demand on the more nutrition and environmental friendly food option. The last one is about the innovation and technology, which could enhance the productivity in agriculture while minimize environmental impact and contribute to both nutrition security and sustainability goals. The important thing is about the challenges is, of course, for the challenge in the policy maker, we would focus on the farmer first. So it's very difficult to changing the behavior on the farmer, to change the behavior to how to change the BAU from the past to kindly or concern in the environmental friendly. But the important thing that can induce them about this, that is the investment or finance investment. Of course, if we have the finance in this, it's easy to pursue them to change the behavior. And the last thing that to can collaborate both of the farmer behavior and the finance investment is collaboration. That is our challenge. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And again, innovation, and what highlights I think the most is what you said just now about the behavioral change and how important is that for all climate aspect, nutrition, food, and also how we're going to achieve the things that we need to achieve is changing what we're doing so far. I mean, the idea is to change the business as usual, and that's totally behavioral change, incentives, more ambition, more investments, and very interesting on what you were doing in the region. So thanks very much. Now, Michelle, I would like to ask you about your sector more specifically, on what needs and what should be added on the agriculture and fisheries sector for ambitious NDCs, knowing that aquaculture and the ocean, many people live thanks to the resources that the ocean gives us. So that's why for many other reasons, it's so important to keep the biodiversity and to keep working on that. So please.
Yeah, thank you, Daniela. And first of all, I wanted to say happy World Fisheries Day. And secondly, I wanted to say blessings to all of you for being here at 5:45 on the last day of COP. I think it really shows our collective dedication to climate resilient and sustainable food systems. So my name is Michelle Tichelaar. I'm the lead on climate and environmental sustainability at WorldFish, which is the fisheries and aquaculture organization of the CGIAR. And I guess I wanted to pick up on the point that Martina shared with us, is that we cannot achieve 1.5 degrees or any of our adaptation goals without including food systems into NDCs, but often lack of capacity is preventing integration of this sector into national climate strategies. And I think that is particularly true for the fisheries and aquaculture sector. If food and agriculture lives outside of our climate ministries, often fisheries and aquaculture is even in a separate ministry or department, so the capacity doesn't always transfer over. So we this year brought together a collection of partners, including FAO, Stanford Center for Ocean Solutions, CARE, Environmental Defense Fund, and Bayer Institute to put together guidelines on integrating fisheries and aquaculture into nationally determined contributions. And first, to answer the questions of why should we even be caring about this sector in the context of climate. As Daniela already highlighted, fisheries and aquaculture, as many of you may be aware, are incredibly important part of our global food systems. An estimated 3 billion people depend on fish and related resources as an essential sort of protein. They contribute about 11% of global agricultural trade by value, and are also considered to be a sustainable form of high quality nutrition. Yet when we looked at NDCs at the moment, we saw that in the 2020 NDCs, 84 countries did not mention aquatic foods at all, and an estimated 37 countries only mentioned them in passing. So there's a huge gap here that can be filled with better integration. And so what we did with our partners, we convened a series of workshops to identify the important intervention areas and policy options. And what we came up with is 5 different intervention areas. The first one being really in the fisheries production realm, focusing on things like sustainable and climate adaptive management, reducing fuel use in fisheries, and climate adaptation options for fisheries, including early warning systems. The second intervention area was around aquaculture production, where we see a lot of opportunity around feed use and feed management for reducing emissions, but also scaling really low input production systems such as seaweed and bivalve production, which are some of the most sustainable production systems in the world. But again, here also opportunities around energy use and a big need for climate adaptation for small-scale fish farmers. But then beyond just the production realm, there's also the supply chains, where for fisheries and aquaculture there is huge losses post-production, and in some cases we see the transportation part contribute as much or increase the carbon footprint times 2 compared to just to the farm gate. And then really focusing on some consumption and diets, thinking about sustainable aquatic foods as a low emission source of nutrition. And then finally, really that interaction with aquatic ecosystems and the importance of blue carbon habitats, both as a source of carbon sequestration, but also coastal adaptation and protection from sea level rise and coastal erosion. And so that's quite a menu, I guess, of policy options in our guidelines, and I'm happy to share QR codes later. We present some concrete measures, some targets, some examples in practice, and we also discuss potential co-benefits and trade-offs. But if I look at the collective of the policy options that we have identified, there's maybe 3 things I want to highlight. The first one being that I'm personally pretty proud of the guidelines that we put together, but I think if you just take them off the shelf, we're not really in a stage where any government can say, okay, great, thank you, we have now put this into our NDC, right? So this will still require some deep consultation with the fisheries and aquaculture experts in government to get to the concrete targets and measures that countries can implement. I think the second thing I wanted to highlight is that all of the work that we include is really deeply cross-sectoral. So it involves the production system, but also natural resource management, consumption and diets, supply chains. And so I think to the point of what several of us have already highlighted, it's really about cross-government coordination and collaboration to bring some of these policy options to fruition with potentially great co-benefits for food and nutrition security and biodiversity. And I guess the final thing I wanted to highlight is just the enormous finance gap that this sector faces in particular. So FAO in its 2024 State of Fisheries and Aquaculture report estimated adaptation needs by 2030 to be about $4.8 billion per year, and current investments are about 200 million. So there's an enormous gap here, and I really hope that countries will use the NDCs as a way to signal that this is an important area for climate investment so that we can fill that gap. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Michelle. And and again, the collaboration. And I think you mentioned a key point at the end, right, for our next speaker. That's the access to finance. And I also wanted to go back to the beginning where we said, okay, 90% of the NDCs already mentioned food and agriculture as a key, as a priority, but we need to dig a bit deeper into this. And you mentioned, for example, agriculture is not included or is not financed, so it's very important not to stop at the headline, but get a bit more deeper into that information. And now I would like to go with Jeremy from FAO. And as Michelle was mentioning, FAO is in different initiatives. For example, you're in the FAST initiative and that just launched Harmonia, and some aspects of these initiatives are on the access of climate finance for farmers and countries. So I would like to hear a bit more about that, please.
Thank you. Being chewed on. So I see you have particularly difficult names today, so you've done quite well. And thank you for inviting us to speak today. You've already mentioned this report that came out earlier this week, looking at agri-food systems, agri-food systems and NDCs, and really just to repeat already some of the key findings that you were mentioning, specifically, obviously, that countries have recognized and are recognizing the importance of agriculture and agri-food systems within their NDCs already, but there is potential for enhancing ambition there, both in terms of adaptation and mitigation. So I think that's kind of where this discussion comes in, and I think it's really important that we're working together, UN agencies, FAO, along with partners such as WWF and BioVision, to really guide this process, because it's obviously an opportunity that countries have to really reflect on the importance of agriculture and agri-food systems in their updated NDCs. This is important because we know we're not on the right track, right? I mean, the UNEP emissions gap report, the adaptation gap report, I mean, it's all showing very clearly that that we're currently not on track to meet the goals of the Paris Agreement, and we're not on track to meet the goals of other multilateral environmental agreements or the SDGs more broadly. So we need to ramp it up, and we need to do so quickly. And as you were pointing out, FAO has been kind of coordinating its support more directly. Sorry, are you okay? On NDCs specifically across 5 main areas, focusing on adaptation, mitigation, inclusiveness and just transition, which is very, very important, ensuring that no one is left behind. Transparency, also very important to actually take stock and see where we are, where we're going, and to be able to really guide enhanced ambition over time. And finally, and this is where I'm coming to now, is on finance and the importance of investments to actually deliver on ambitious NDCs. It's also the focus of the conference, obviously, looking at how we can enhance ambition and then how we can enable action. And here, just to highlight a few support areas, FAO is really happy to have received or be receiving support from BMZ, the German Ministry for Economic Development, to have a NDC support helpline, which it's or help desk. It's launching, as well as the commitment by the German Ministry of Environment to continue its support of the SCALA program, which is the Scaling Up Climate Ambition on Land Use and Agriculture, through NDCs, and I think also very importantly NAPs. I mean, we need to make sure that we're considering the connection between the NDCs, the National Adaptation Plans, the NBSAPs, as well as the land degradation neutrality goals that countries set. And maybe moving more specifically to finance, we can have the best and most ambitious NDCs in the world. If we don't have the resources to actually implement them, then we will not be reaching the goals that have been set. We will not be able to respond to the priorities that countries have identified. And coming in here, you've already mentioned the Food and Agriculture for Sustainable Transformation Partnership, which was initiated by the Egyptian presidency at COP27. And we're really happy. This is kind of a multi-stakeholder, multi-country partnership that was initiated by the Egyptians, but is being taken from one COP to the next. We're really happy to have Azerbaijan also joining the FAST partnership, which really is aiming at looking not only to support the focus of increasing the quantity, but also the quality of climate finance for agri-food system and for agri-food system transformation. And within that, as you also mentioned, the COP29 presidency this week has launched the Baku Harmonia Climate Initiative for Farmers, which will be embedded and which will be a flagship program as part of FAST, really with the idea of, I think, kind of clarifying and providing a better overview of the landscape of initiatives and support that exists as a basis for evidence-based decision-making at different levels to in line with agri-food system transformation needs, catalyzing again investments, and empowering really farmers and communities to be engaged and to participate in climate action. So those are just a few areas of that I wanted to outline, and thank you very much for the question. And I hope you're okay. Okay.
Thank you very much, Jeremy. And as you were mentioning, we can have the most ambitious NDCs, but without the funding, there is no way. So again, thanks very much for showing us the different initiatives that FAO is working on. And now I would like to open the floor for questions from the audience. Anyone to have?
I have a question with regards to funding alignment at national level with NDCs and NAPs, something living in a country and working as a for a UN organization in a country office. I have observed that countries have very ambitious NDCs and NAPs, but they struggle to align the programs and projects that are done at country level with those strategies, or to ensure that that anything that's done in the country is afterwards aligned. So both ways. Is there any type of work or experiences that you can share in that context of then like implementing NDCs and NAPs and ensuring that finances actually go in these set objectives?
Who would like to start?
Thanks for the question. I think this is very important, and Jeremy also mentioned we can produce a very ambitious NDCs, and but if there is no sufficient funding, I think it will remain in itself as just a document. I'll give you an example from Nepal. We have a national adaptation plan that we submitted in 2021 by the Ministry of Forest and Environment, and we have set the the financial gaps of around $47 billion by 2050. So in average, we are kind of looking for $2 billion of national adaptation plan. At the same time, the NDC, we have also set something slightly more than $30 billion in the next 10 years, which are submitted in 2021. So that comes like average of $3 billion. So these are our ambitions, and we are in no position to generate the resources on our own to meet these targets of both adaptation and mitigations. So unless the global leaders, and then we are in the right platform now in COP21, and we hope that by tomorrow we'll see those ambitions, in terms of providing the finance as well. But without the finances, I think we have already seen, because we are now running in 2024 towards the end, and we have already passed 3-4 years in terms of both mitigation and adaptation options. In our case, at least in Nepal, we don't see a good sign, because what we have is I don't know, something like 300 million of GCF fundings and other kind of climate finances at the rate, I mean, average of 20 or 30 million dollars. So I think we have shown our ambition in terms of what we need, but the developed countries and then the global, the leaders also need to come with the ambition in terms of what they need to provide. And it's just not like, we are asking, and we have already discussed this, the discussion about the just transitions and then the common but differential responsibilities. We need these resources, otherwise it's very difficult, like you mentioned, it's very difficult to reach the target of the 1.5 degree world. Yeah, I'll stop here.
So in case of Thailand, the agriculture sector just included in the NDC, and the past for the overall of country in the agriculture sector, half of them is from rice for the greenhouse gas emission. So in the past, we got the in the term of country, if the finance from in our government, it just a little for implement, we just implement only in the pilot site. So if we got the internal support from the other, like at the past in for the lice department, they got the funded from the project is Thai Rice Nama, and now they got the new funding from the Thai. We call the project is Thai Rice GCF. In Thai Rice Nama, they did not include that in the NDC yet, but for Thai Rice GCF is also will included for our NDC in the agriculture sector.
Thank you very much. First, I think it's very interesting from all the speaker, and together with the discussion, so I totally agree with the Thailand, because in Vietnam also the same case. The financial is the shortest, but I think that financial is only is not enough, and in Vietnam we think that. We try to work together with the international and also private sector, and with the support from international like FAO, CGIAR or WWF, we see that as some case like a seed fund, the core fund, that if we make the pilot case successfully, we can mobilize even the domestic or the private sector to join, because anyway the budget from the government is not enough, and also the support from outside also is also not meet the requirement. But anyway, we also have to find a way to support the farmer, and also listen from the speaker. So I think in Vietnam, in agriculture sector, the fishery is still, we are not yet included the NDC, but I don't know when we can include it, because it's a concrete solution that we also have to point out. So now, really, with the need from the government, we really would like the World Fish, the FAO, CGIAR, WWF, and also other international to really work with the government, because if we harmonize the international support and with the government one, so we can repurpose or maximize use of the limited existing resources. Anyway, thank you very much.
Thanks so much. Okay, go.
Yeah, thank you for that remark. And I just wanted to give a small add on to your point about including fisheries and aquaculture in Vietnam's climate targets, because in May we organized a workshop in Vietnam on this topic. It was together with VFEP, the Vietnamese Institute for Fisheries, Economics and Policy, and it was on this topic of including fisheries and aquaculture into NDCs. And I think the government really recognizes the importance of the sector, but then there's also big data gaps that are prohibiting target setting. So, for example, in Vietnam, the shrimp farming sector is really important, including from an export and economic point of view, and it's also a big source of greenhouse gas emissions. But currently, there's huge data gaps around what are exactly those emissions. So they would like to say, okay, by X year we reduce these emissions by X%, but if you don't know where you are today, how can you begin to include? But if you don't include them now, then how can you, so I think, I don't know if Martina, if other people have experience with this issue of, okay, if we currently have data gaps, are we continuously punting on putting it in our NDCs, or do you put in, how do you get going? So I don't know if people have thoughts on that question.
Yeah, I don't know if Martina wants to reply immediately to that or. Okay.
To be honest, when I saw the title of today about healthy diets, I feel very interested. Why? Because that's the first time we think about the producer and also consumer and how the healthy diets for all left no one behind. So, but the same with our culture of fish. We don't have the information about the data, how the food choice can be made, and that's how it contributes to the NDC achievement. We don't have the information. That's a big gap in not only in data, but also in the appearance, how the country can have the multi-sector voice together to put inside. So I also try to learn from all of you. If you have any appearance on one country contact consideration of the market incentive from the healthier food choice and contribute to also the climate commitment, that would be right. Because at that time, we would like also to the consumer to can sell their low emission product to the market. And the consumer can have more willingness to pay more because that requires more investment from the farmer. But how to make that? We need the data, we need the support, not only at the general, but also how to implement. Thank you very much. Yeah.
Thanks very much. We have another question here. And also, using the words of Santosh, the first question on the importance of the finance for NAPs, just to highlight, we're at COP and the NAPS negotiations were basically dropped because of the lack of the language of finance. So that's why it's super important to have that discussion too.
Hi everyone, my name is Madhav Karki. I'm advisor to the Forest Minister in Nepal, but I'm also an international researcher. So agriculture, basically food system is not getting into NDC. So that's a challenge I heard from you. And I think in the next NDC, many countries will include food system, not food system agriculture into the NDC. But as you heard from many countries, just by putting NDC without having finance, it will not get implemented. So that means climate goal will not be achieved. So what I feel from my perspective, and we have heard, I think, from the previous food system conferences, one was held in FAO, without transformation, you cannot implement food system in NDC or in any other climate action. And transformation means that you have to have a more holistic goal. You can't just solve the food system challenges by only focusing on climate. You have to also focus on nature crisis. Actually, you have to triple planetary crisis, nature crisis, climate crisis, and pollution crisis. If you do, and if you're coming from fishery, I think ocean pollution and ocean acidification are the major challenges to the fishery. So what I'm suggesting, and I didn't hear from the panelists, that what type of transformation pathways are necessary to implement food system if it is included into NDC. Now, we talk about challenges, agriculture, FOLU, as they call it, is a difficult to abate sector. Means methane production from rice, animal, livestock, and then the emission, carbon emission from the machineries. I think these are a major mitigation, the major emission sources. So we need to address that, and for that you need to change the behavior of the consumers. I mean, she alluded to it. The whole dietary, shift from more chemical-based or more processed food and more, eating from meat to more I would say nature-based food. So then, and then finance. I have some knowledge of how GCF funds. GCF will not fund if it is not related to either nature-based solutions or agriculture where you are doing the mitigation. So the adaptation, nature-based solution, mitigation, you have to do agriculture emission reduction. So I am suggesting to have a more holistic, wherein you have behavior change, dietary change, you have awareness raising, and you have to also have a landscape approach, wherein you are, developing this green and blue value chains. So this is a whole lot of transformative pathways, and that I think we need to talk about. Of course, water is very critical in everything, but we need to have a holistic approach. Otherwise, it will be difficult. Thank you. Sorry about that.
No worry. I'm Marcela from Brazil, and to follow up on your comment, Brazil's NDC is actually touching upon agriculture, but my question would be, how can we be sure that the toll on fulfilling the requirements are not going to crush the farmers through the implementation? If it's a top-down approach and without capacitation, just a check in the box to get subsidies, there are such ambitious targets that they cannot comply with. How can we have results? How can we make this implementation, right? Because we do talk about agriculture, but I don't see, at least right now in the NDC, a clear plan. And I know that we are creating a lot of committees, and we're talking about cities and states working together with the civil society and so on. But I think that the most alarmist thing for me is that we do not crush the farmers through that process.
Thanks very much. Now we can maybe go back to the panel to respond immediately, and then we have another question here in the front.
Thank you. Maybe just picking up on the last comment specifically, I've been a little bit more involved in the development of the NDC in Georgia, and I think, from the perspective, I think also of countries, but specifically also of organizations like FAO and partners, that there's no intention to crush any farmers. Let me say that first. And in Georgia, for instance, the process has been quite nice with the creation of different working groups, including farmers, including civil society, because the idea is obviously that this kind of reflects the priorities of the country, including of the different people involved. So very much would like to advocate that we see this from the perspective of kind of the inclusiveness that I was also mentioning, and very importantly, I think, because what you're getting at a little bit more is kind of maybe some of the requirements or some of the ideas around mitigation goals, but certainly, the adaptation element of this is quite important, and I think we have tended in the past, at least partially maybe reflecting how the negotiations have gone under UNFCCC, to completely see mitigation separate from adaptation. Right, and kind of have those in separate boxes. We've had them in separate finance boxes. We've had them in separate kind of boxes in terms of our approach and support. And I think we are seeing much more now that obviously we don't need to think them apart. There are synergies that we can take advantage of where, certain actions on the ground will contribute to building resilience while also reducing emissions. Livestock is always a perfect example. You improve the health of your livestock, your herds or whatever. That builds your resilience to climate shocks, but at the same time, it reduces emissions and contributes to dealing with climate change on that front. Just maybe picking up on one other comment in terms of, I think, balancing again, we need to really work in an integrated, holistic manner. I think it's been said a few times, and in this sense, for instance, speaking of diets, WHO and FAO has developed guidelines in terms of seeking to align both environmental health and socio-cultural kind of priorities, and I think guidelines like that can really support us in finding the right approach to responding to the different needs we have. Over.
I will inform you more about my experience in Thailand, because according to the NDC in agriculture is that to start in Thailand that we don't have the other so many options for the NDC in the agriculture sector. For Thailand, we just input the AWD in rice, and the other to decrease the nitrogen fertilizer in chemical for decrease the nitrous oxide, and the other thing is in the livestock to reduce the methane. For the fishery, it's not included yet. This is we have less option for input the NDC in agriculture sector, and moreover, it is difficult. We think about it. It's difficult to how to increase the income, or how to get the incentive back to the farmer that if they do like it to decrease the NDC. We have two options. The first one that we will now we implement by using the seating mechanism, such as for the decrease the greenhouse gas management. We try to set the platform of the carbon credit to input to incentive for back to them. And the other thing, in the policy of the Ministry of Agriculture, we have the principal standard is good agricultural practice, or GAP. So we will use this standard to be one mechanism to get more high income for them. Now we have the project on the crop residue burning reduction, but it's not included in the NDC yet. We're starting to decrease the greenhouse gas management also, but now we implement the new standard called GAP PM 2.53 to the farmer who grow the corn or the maize on that. Now we in the now we discuss with the private sector, because in the model project we pay back by our budget from the government, but we try to convince the private sector like a feed mill organization to collaborate with us to intend them. If the farmer get the certificate from the government, they should pay more income for the farmer that get the certificate from us. However, the private sector have limited. They ask we to invest them too from because they pay more. We have to pay them back. This is very difficult for us. So it's the other challenge for us also to do like this. Yes, thank you.
Yeah, thank you for that really important questions about ensuring that targets at national level do not end up having negative ramifications for the people who are ultimately producing our food. So in our guidelines too, in addition to all these policy options we identified, we had a series of enabling measures, and one of them really was equitable access to finance and resources, and the other one was about really inclusive processes to get to these targets and implementation. And I had the pleasure of learning from someone from Brazilian government involved in NDC development yesterday about the extremely elaborate stakeholder consultation process you had for developing your NDC targets. So I guess the processes to do this well are really challenging. And need to be very comprehensive. But I think it also means for research organizations like myself that when we think about developing climate adaptation and mitigation solutions, that it means thinking about not just the technical components, but also really the social and equity components. So if I may, I wanted to just highlight one piece of work that aligns with what we identify in our guidelines as the number one climate action when it comes to fisheries, which is a sustainable and climate adaptive fisheries management. And I wanted to highlight an example from Bangladesh. I'm looking here at our Bangladesh scientist. I'm hoping I'm not going to mess the example up, but it's really about sustainable fisheries management. And in Bangladesh, there is a seasonal closure of the fishery to promote sustainable stocks. But if you close a fishery, that also means that the people who depend on that fishery might end up experiencing negative economic and food and nutrition ramifications. And so in Bangladesh, ultimately, that sustainable fisheries management policy was developed in such a way as to also include a social safety net for the periods in which the fishery was closed, so that the sort of potential crushing, in this case, of the fisher would be offset through inclusive policy. So I think that's some of the examples of how these kind of interventions can be designed with the food producers in mind.
Yeah, I would like to address the second lot questions from the Dr. Karki. I think Dr. Karki made a very important point of holistic management of the resources while achieving the both mitigation and adaptations. It's very clear that the impact of climate change, particularly on different sectors, are cross-sectoral. The impact on one sector is caused by the implications on the other sectors. So while managing for example, the fisheries or water resources, it's equally important to look at where the resources are coming from. How do we manage the watershed where the good quality and quantity of the water is also coming to the downstream areas. So and then for that to happen, I think the cross sectoral collaborations, both horizontal and vertical within the government systems, within the different subnational governments, are also very important. At the same time, he made a very important point on the transformational. How do we transform our agriculture, food and water systems? For that reason, I think the technology and innovations are also very important, but that doesn't come with the cost of how do we change our behaviors across the stakeholders, from the farmers to the consumers. I think that investment on that side is also very, very important. I was looking at the figure in the morning, how much methane is produced by the rice, the fields, and then something like, I think if I vaguely remember, 500 million or something, the ton of the methane is produced. So how do we change our behavior in terms of productions? If we do the flooded kind of rice productions, that has a different level of methane productions. But if we do the altering wet and dry kind of, that substantially reduce the the methane productions. But how do we incentivize farmers to choose those kind of options which has a less productions? This is one side. And then equally on the consumer sides, how do we change our behaviors? Here we are like, there was a discussion happening around the dietary requirements, or the beef, which is like a, the huge source of methane production. Something like one cow in his, every year, something like 500 liters. So how do we change our dietary requirements so that we try to address the, the problems where it is actually arising? So I think both from the developing countries, but also in the dietary requirements of the developed country sites, and the way we are using the resources. All this needs to be very much looked into the holistic perspective. Thank you.
Thank you very much. No, I think we've been listening a lot of very fruitful conversations. We cannot forget that the NDCs are exactly for trying to keep the goals, the 1.5, and also it's, let's say it in a very like kind of crazy way, maybe it's try to save the world and for the next generations. It's something that we need to keep an eye on. How are we including other generations? And with that, I would like to also pass to our last speaker. She's Annelien van Oefelen. It's the last time I get this wrong of the last names. She's a climate change and WASH specialist from UNICEF Madagascar. So please, Annelien, if you can also wrap up a bit of what this great panel said, and also why it's important to keep the youth and children involved in these processes.
Thank you so much for giving me the floor. It was really very interesting to follow the different perspectives that we had on the panel today. I don't want to cover you, so I'm going to send over there. Yeah, to see how we can move towards more inclusive, but also very ambitious NDCs, which include water, agroecology, food systems, diets, and all the different steps of the agricultural value chain. So, yeah, thank you for these very enriching discussions. I think what I learned here today is that it's really important to have a multi-sectoral perspective, but also to really make use of all the tools that are out there, because there's so many tools, and even though we have them, there is still lacks of integrating certain aspects into the NDCs. But also an important thing, I think that is a key takeaway for me, is we have a challenge here in very high ambitions, lots of pressure on governments, low funding, and then at the same time, in the end, putting expectations on people that work in the value chains that have very low leverage for actually changing their behaviors. And we need to also give them the incentives that are necessary in order to be able to change these behaviors. And I think another key aspect that I can take away from today's discussion is that we should not forget to start working with the population of a country from a very low age to actually infiltrate in them key principles that they can follow in their behavior within society, so that NDC implementation in the future becomes much easier. These are two key takeaways that I had. But then also, yeah, another key takeaway that I had was, as we have a lot of guidelines on a global level, how we implement these ambitions on a national level, but then transferring them from national to subnational level and actually bringing the finances there and steering them towards there is not so easy. And I was actually wondering, while I was following the discussions, how international organizations can support countries more in making the steps on really breaking down the implementation of NDCs, because we have lots of ambitions, we have guidance on what we need to consider when we formulate them, but I can also see, I'm working in Madagascar, I can see the struggle of even the organizations and the sectors working within the country to then take these big ambitions and big words and break them down to practice. So this was another key takeaway that I had from the discussion today, and that might, I think, also help countries afterwards to mobilize the resources, because sometimes, well, in the end, projects and programs that we're formulating at national level, they're really building on smaller scale actions. We've heard today we have funding for piloting things, but we don't have funding to directly implement these ambitions at whole national level. So how can we break them down into small pieces that can be scaled up, and how do we know which of these big pieces we need to first tackle to then be able to scale it up to the ambitions that we're having in these NDCs. So I see there a bit of a divergence between these like global guidance and then the country's reality and the funding that is available. yeah, we had some really inspiring examples also from Thailand, I think it was, of like incentivizing farmers through carbon credits or incentivizing people that work across the value chain through carbon credits. And private sector engagement as well in scaling up ambitions and seeing how we can actually mobilize the private sector to work towards the NDCs with us. In the negotiation rooms, I've heard lots of arguments against even mentioning the private sector, so we keep this to us for afterwards. And then, another key takeaway that I have from today is the importance of integrating all these national plans that we have. So integrating the ambitions for biodiversity, desertification and climate change to actually work towards joint goals rather than having people working in silos also amongst these and even putting more pressure in different pathways for countries. So this was another key takeaway that I had from today's discussion, and I thought it was really great to see that it's actually already been considered by countries, but also by different international organizations. So I think it's very encouraging to build up on this momentum of the discussion of today and to see the large efforts that we're actually all doing to reach global climate ambitions and to arrive at the 1.5 targets. So I'm ending this discussion and this panel with hope. And I hope that we even get more hope tomorrow when we see the results of the climate finance discussions. And thank you so much for sharing the experience and for giving me the opportunity to bring the intergenerational aspect also in the discussion.
Thank you very much, Annelien. And yes, okay, so COP is coming to an end, but collaboration is just starting, and let's keep moving forward. Thanks very much. A big round of applause for our speakers, and see you around. Thanks so much. Enjoy your evening.